Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 109. Welcome to the final episode of Journaling with Nature podcast for 2022. It's been a very full year, challenging in a lot of ways, but also filled with joyful connections with nature and with people. I want to take some time to thank everyone who has tuned in to listen this year, and especially to those who have supported the podcast through Patreon. Your pledge has made it possible for me to continue interviewing these incredible guests week after week, and I'm very grateful to you. My guest today is Melissa Gonzalez. Melissa is a landscape contractor who has a passion for creating beautiful gardens that benefit pollinators and people, creating spaces that are able to uplift and connect people with the natural world, especially with the desert plants of her Las Vegas home. We touched on many different topics during our conversation, including the family members who have influenced Melissa's love of gardening and nature, the importance of pollinators, and how nature journaling helps her be a better designer. Let's listen. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me. I am just delighted to have you here, and I can't wait to dive into your story.
Oh, thank you, Bethan. I am so excited to continue our conversation. So I'm just so grateful that you reached out, and I'm getting to know you better. I'm so excited because meeting you through nature journaling workshops and stuff has been amazing. So thank you.
It's beautiful to see you, and gardens and nature have been part of your life for a really long time. I'd love to begin by hearing about your nature experiences as a child, how you were involved and connected with nature in your early years.
Yeah, so I've always been connected with nature because I've been around family that have influenced me through nature. For example, my dad has always had a maintenance company and here in Las Vegas, and he had his company for over 20 years. And so assisting him with projects and his clientele, like everyone knew who I was, and I've always been like involved in his maintenance work, and also his connection with nature because he loves nature. Like his vacation is being out in the woods somewhere with his brother and friends, and they just like love just being out into nature. And so that has always influenced me in a way to always be connected to that. And also my grandmother, my mom's mom, she's always been a plant lover. She had an amazing indoor plant haven in her own home since as far as I can remember. And she loved birds. And that is something new that I've started to reflect back because someone asked me recently, it's like, what made you into a birder? And I'm like, I got involved in more connection with nature because what I studied in landscape architecture, because that was always something that my dad always inspired me to like learn more about. And I not that I was against it, I just had my dream of becoming a designer in a different way. Like when I was growing up, we were always participated in like different weddings. And at that time when I was young, like 8, 9, and you're growing older, you see all these beautiful brides and their beautiful dresses. I'm like, I want to become a bridal designer. So that was always stuck in my head that I would be a bridal designer. And when I was in high school, I studied drafting. And so I was like, we don't have a fashion design school here. And I never saw myself leaving my parents or my family, like outside of Las Vegas. It was just so difficult because I just feel so attached to them.
Yes.
And I was also helping my dad a lot in his business, so I just could never disconnect not being here just to study fashion design. So I studied interior design while helping him and run his business. And then that didn't work out. After a year, I found out that the school I was at was not an accredited college, and I always felt like that was important. And I don't know how that happened where I didn't know that. So I went to horticulture classes at the community college, and then I got sucked in to researching pollinators, and that's how I was like so fascinated about wildlife and how unique our Mojave Desert is. Because I've always loved my city, and a lot of people leave the city, but I've always been like having the opportunity to stay. And so I think nature has always been around me, but I found my way of appreciating nature in my own way, you know? So
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah. And all that naturally led to you starting your own business. Your business is beautiful. It's called Earth Green Landscapes. You're a landscape contractor and you help design landscapes that connect people and animals and plants. I'd love for you to talk about that side of your work.
Yeah, so I'll I'll talk a little bit about how I felt more connected to nature was because I was gifted from my best friend, and I'm gonna try not to get emotional because
Yeah,
I'm
it's
such an
okay.
emotional person, but um like she gifted me this personal growth book
Hmm.
from Deepak Chopra, and it was like the seven spiritual laws of success. And so I've always been a person that felt that I needed to learn more about myself. And after reading that book, I like every time I went to the bookstore, I was like, that was like the category that I was always
Hmm.
wondering.
Hmm.
And so, personal growth book has always been something that I was very interested in learning more about to learn more about myself. And then when I started taking those horticulture classes and learning about wildlife and how they need us to provide them for food and shelter, I was like, oh my gosh, like that feels so amazing to see. And it made me feel more at ease
Mm.
and more connected to nature in a way that it helps me to tune out of the world. And then by creating these wildlife habitats where it becomes friendly to people to observe, I saw the connection of like how people appreciated that because it's something that I feel like we're so busy in our lives with work. And so, because I've designed, also with my team, we designed spaces where people can arrive home from work, is how I thought. They come home from work, they can step out into the summer evening or spring morning and just like enjoy their own outdoors to inspire them to be out into one of our unique wildlife places here in Nevada because there is so much hiking that we can do here and be connected to that. And that brings people to be more conscious of like how delicate our desert landscapes really is. So I really felt that connection of like we are all connected with wildlife. It's just giving them the opportunity to be part of our world because we're part of their world. Is how I see it, you know. And so
Absolutely.
when I was, it's like I love to see it as the architecture of wildlife because they've had a habitat for so long without us. And because cities grow, we are eliminating those spaces for them. And so I want to keep learning more how I can help them, but also through design, you know? and get connected to people and to our unique environment.
I love that. I love that consideration of like, what are you going to feel? You know, we can have these beautiful places, we can have flowers that are pleasing to the eye, but this consideration of like, what's it going to feel like when you step outside of an afternoon and you're tired and you want to connect, you want to relax? How's this built landscape going to help you feel something in that moment? I
Hmm.
love that. I think that's amazing. You write sometimes about sacred gardening. I wonder if you could speak a little
Hmm.
about that.
Oh yeah, so like our homes, our interior homes, we always make our or we create our spaces to feel comfortable. And to me, that's like connecting to sacredness because when you are when you have this special place in your home, you feel connected to yourself, or you feel like you can like block out the outside noise. And so incorporating that into the outdoors, like how you mentioned, like how people can feel outdoors, like that's the sacredness garden because it's connecting you to nature,
Mm.
but it's connecting you to your unique garden that's attracting wildlife because to them it's also sacred because you're providing something that's going to be helpful for their own well-being. But some people don't know, like, you observing nature is so beneficial to your own health.
Yes.
We just don't know it, and or we oversee that. And so for me, it's like the sacredness because it's a connection to ourselves, but also wildlife is so connected to that because it's they're attracted to your garden because you're providing something very beneficial to them. And nature is an automatic thing that's connecting us to it. We just have to like sit down and acknowledge it and reflect, and then that's when we reflect on our own selves. And not it's we're part of it. It's so that's how I kind of see
Yeah.
like the sacredness of that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're part of it, and it's easy to forget that. And some spaces can help us remember that, yeah, we're all a part of this amazing thing that's happening here and now. And it's beautiful to remember and be reminded of that.
Yeah, because like I imagine like when you see a bird's nest forming in your own garden, like how beautiful is that? Like they're creating something in your home
Yes.
that's their home too, you know?
Yes,
But
neighbors. Absolutely.
yeah, it's like we're so connected, and it's like how can we help each other? Because when we're observing that behavior, that action, and what comes after that, it's like we're like this that curiosity of like what's gonna happen next, or
Yeah.
like recently, I'm so excited to go back to one of my favorite places that I love to go bird. um, it's called the Henderson Bird Viewing Preserve, and there's these milkweeds near a pond, and I noticed that there was a monarch caterpillar. There were 2 monarch caterpillars, one smaller in age, I'm assuming, and the larger one is it's like in the same shrub. So, and there's a chrysalis too. So I'm so excited to go either tomorrow or the next day and just like observe for the third time, like where like what's happening, and it's reminding me to learn more about the cycle of butterflies,
Mm-hmm.
but I also feel like they're breadcrumbs from the universe to focus. For some reason, I feel like I need to learn more about the monarchs. Like I've always loved them. It's so unique, the way that they travel and the cycles of their life. And because I've been experiencing them for the last couple of months, and then I see the caterpillars, I'm like, "Oh my gosh." I was like, "Okay, so I'm gonna pay attention and I'm gonna get very," like, I grabbed my nature journal and I just started sketching, like, just the caterpillars and the chrysalis and where the shrub was located. And there's like an abundance of milkweeds. And I'm like, why is it just this one milkweed that they're attracted to? Like, where the monarch decided to lay her eggs. And so I started researching that, and I started to learn about different people that have been interviewed through podcasts, like the uniqueness of monarchs and how they've been studying them, and why they like there's like a disease called OE, which I didn't know much about. And so I started to learn that. And then I came across like a sick butterfly
Oh.
and a monarch butterfly. Yeah, I was like, I was doing a property walkthrough with one of my clients, and we saw this monarch butterfly in the asphalt, and it was just like sunbathing, but you can tell it was like very weak. And she flew like on my shoulder, and a little chip of her wing cut
Oh.
off,
Oh.
and she had this like liquid substance in her wing. And then wasn't sure what to do, and so I was just like, for next time, like I didn't bring it home because I didn't want to interfere with that path of that particular
Mm.
butterfly,
Mm.
especially if I don't know. I just left the butterfly near nectar, and just prayed that she was okay. But um, those little breadcrumbs lead me to like, because I'm so inquisitive,
Yeah.
kind of leads me to do this research, especially after finding the caterpillars and the milkweed. Um, I'm excited for the additional questions that I have for or you know, I started to document like, how far is this milkweed from this tree, because it's under this beautiful desert willow, and it's near water. And then also just like the counts, like why is it just the shrub, but then I have to look at each shrub.
Yes.
So it's like learning how to document that, and then also doing my research, because then I learned something else new. I learned that we shouldn't plant milkweed so close to each other because butterflies won't be attracted to lay their eggs. And I'm like, wow, I was like, so doing the nature journaling is teaching me how to become a better designer, and like how to teach other people how to plant milkweeds. Like, let's not plant them so close. It's like, because scientists are collecting data from their own labs. Like they planted different milkweeds, and they kind of did different designs, and they saw what is attracting them and not. So that to me interests me, because
Yes.
it's like nature journaling is helping me ask myself different questions, because I don't know. I'm so passionate about it. I feel like I can keep going. But
I love that. I love what you said. You said these little breadcrumbs are reminders to pay attention. This is
Mhm.
really wonderful, a really wonderful way to express that. That whole sort of mindset of nature journaling is just remember to pay attention, because there's all these incredible wonders around us. And I love that your nature journaling is feeding back into your work and making you know more about how to do this amazing work that you're engaged with. I love what you just said.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's yeah, like my mom has always been so connected to plants because of her mom. And it's like it's so wonderful to see when she's like requesting certain plants. And I'm like, oh yeah, the bees are gonna love those. And so by me talking like that for years, they've gotten comfortable to the fact that bees are okay. It's just like, also that the breadcrumbs for my family. It's like it's okay to have this plant. It's going to attract the bees or other butterflies or birds. And they show an appreciation, and they also share their
Hmm.
experiences.
Hmm.
And then we all learn from each other.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this with you, because you've got all this knowledge passing on down your family. You've got, learning your trade really through helping your father. And you talked about that your personal garden is a garden that's created by your father, and
Hmm.
his garden contains his creative ideas, his connection with plants, and his investment of time and energy. And I wonder what it's like to sort of collaborate on this intergenerational garden experience.
Yeah, so when it comes to our own, like our home garden, because I still live with my parents.
Yeah.
We're room. I always like to say that we're roommates, because it's just me and them. But um, he designed this garden in our backyard when they bought the house in the 90s. I was still in high school, so it was like many years ago. So it was probably like 1993 or something like that, or 95. And it was just a blank canvas in the backyard. And the way that he designed it, I was just like amazed of like the meandering path that he created, and the center of the garden, more towards the north, he created this platform where he placed a table with benches around.
Mm-hmm.
And so we always have really great memories having summer dinners, spring lunches, and breakfast. And so he loves grass. For years, I've been telling, because he planted two areas of grass,
Mm-hmm.
and we've always had dogs, because we love dogs, and dogs love grass. And so my dad has always been like, I've always tried to let's take out the grass and create a meadow and all these beautiful plants, and we're going to see all kinds of wildlife. And he's always been hesitant. So in that perspective, when it comes to our own home, we kind of clash.
Yeah. You've got different ideas.
He's like, no. He's like, don't take my grass out. I love my grass. It feels so refreshing when I'm outside, because that's his haven too, you know?
Yes.
And so I, like, this year, I'm going to be very honest. This year, I actually was like, okay, I'll compromise with you. If you can leave the grass in the backyard, can you please take out the grass in the front yard? And he said yes. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, a win for both. I like it.
Yeah, but when it comes to like business, and he really listens to me. Like, he's like, I feel like we learn a lot from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to business, I love to share the ideas, and I love the ideas that come from him, because he sees like the flow of water, the rain, the terrain. It's like the grading and drainage that I learned in school that I was not very, it's very like, I don't know, it was one of the most difficult classes for me. And so I studied a lot to get a good grade.
I love that you got your dad there for backup when you need someone to bounce ideas off.
And also too, he keeps my feet in the ground, because I can dream so much, and he's like, wait, that's a lot of plants. Like, let's condense it down.
Do you know what?
That's a lot of plants.
This what you've just said is really interesting, and it ties back in with what we were talking about, gardens and a feeling and sacred spaces. Because for your dad, grass brings a certain feeling, and for you, a meadow might bring a certain feeling. And so it shows about design and how personal design is, and how you can work with that particular person and what brings them alive, what makes them feel connected. So I guess how personal that feeling can be, and how personal the design needs to be as a consequence.
Exactly. It really is. And that's why I think this year I had to put myself in his shoes and just be like, okay, I get the refreshness. And also the dogs, like, he speaks for our pets, He's
got an extra vote if he's talking for the dog.
Exactly. I know. So it's fun in that perspective. And now my mom is voicing a lot too. She's like, I want my rosemaries. And I'm like, okay, cool. Because, bees love rosemaries.
Yeah.
She wants them in a particular way. And they got planted for her this year again, because she just wanted more and more. And I'm like, oh my gosh, let's bring in other plants. So it's fun.
My goodness.
They're fun.
I love it. I'd love to hear about I'd love to hear you describe your landscape. You know, you're really connected with the desert landscape. And yeah, I'd love for you to describe what it's like where you live.
Oh, the Mojave Desert.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a very unique landscape. Like,
Hmm.
we get really intense summers, um, and then working outside can be very difficult,
Mm,
because it's so hot. When there's a breeze in the summer, we love it. Trees are very important when working within a landscape. And so, the the landscape outside of the city, out of the urban city, it's what defines, I feel, the true landscape of what Las Vegas and
hmm.
other neighboring cities see, like the connectedness from one city to the other. You see, when you're at a higher elevation, you see the Joshua Tree woodland and that unique landscape that's so beautiful. Like when you see a Joshua tree, it's like you know you're in the Mojave Desert.
Yes.
And when you're at a lower elevation, you start to see less and less Joshua trees, and you start to see the creosotes and the Mojave yuccas, and the Red Rock Canyon, and or it's the color of the mountains of that landscape is just like gorgeous. And if we want to experience snow, we're able to go to Mount Charleston at a higher elevation, and we're like in the pinyon juniper woodland area, and it's so refreshing. And so we can have our dose of snow in the winter, but then we have this unique winter too, because that's why I love Las Vegas. Is I love how like winter can be so warming, because we have our sun is like just like shining every day. There's certain days that does get kind of gloomy, but not a lot. It's
Mm.
very minimal, So it's a it's beautiful, and it's delicate too,
Hmm.
because with climate change, there's like an imbalance too with the the in particular, what I'm gonna say is like the connection with the yucca moth and the Joshua trees. Because of that imbalance, they're not able. They're emerging before they should to pollinate
Mm.
the Joshua trees, and so I still have a lot of research to do in that perspective. But it's alarming for me, because
Mm.
it's like a lot of people love Joshua trees in the Mojave Desert, and we need to talk more about that to see what we can continue to do, because that's a habitat for wildlife, and it's also one of our unique landscapes that need to be preserved, like to protect them.
Yes.
And we're also part of the Pacific Flyway for the birds, and in that same Pacific Flyway, I think, even if I'm not mistaken, I think even like the monarchs are part of that Pacific Flyway, if I'm not mistaken. Like, those are the questions that I've always like written down. Like this, this is a recent question because I'm studying the monarchs right now,
Yeah.
and it's awesome. I don't know. That's not the word awesome, but it's like it's just a beautiful, unique, delicate, gorgeous desert. Like I can't imagine myself living anywhere else.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that it's like it's absolutely a part of you, this desert landscape and the plants and the pollinators and everything that's happening there. And I love that you're bringing that alive in people's gardens. And I'm wondering about what sorts of factors you have to consider when creating a desert landscape in a contained, controlled environment in someone's garden.
Yeah, so number one is water, because
Mm,
we're running out
mm,
of water. And so water is always something that is always in mind, because if we are creating more plants that are or using plants that are native, but also combining them with non-native that are drought tolerant.
mm, mm,
And so, because a lot of the native plants, people want to see more color, or they want to see more
mm,
beauty, or I mean, and not that desert plants aren't, like, our native plants aren't beautiful, they are, but it's like It may be beautiful to me, but it may not be
Yes.
beautiful to my
It
client,
maybe
you
not
know?
showy. Like that some plants are really showy and some plants have their beauty in an understated way.
Exactly. So combining both drought tolerant plants with native plants is always interesting and fun because native plants are kind of hard to find,
Hmm.
like to be sold in the city. So if I have something very particular like desert milkweeds, it's just difficult to find them. It's very rare when you do. So I have to do custom orders. And so when it comes to that, sometimes it's guaranteed, other times it's not. So I don't know why, but
Mm.
it's something that also needs to be talked about, which
Mm.
is very interesting because that topic has come up a lot lately with my new friends from the Red Rock Audubon Society. So it's like it's interesting because I'm like, oh my gosh, I it's a new group of people that I'm surrounded with, and I'm like so grateful because I get to nerd out about all these different things. So it's fun.
That's so good. Pollinators keep coming up. Pollinators are really important to you, and I'd love for you to tell us about what it is about pollinators that are so important.
I just love observing them. They're so tiny,
Yeah.
and or a lot of them, right? They're like these tiny little bees, and then we have moths that are like so cool that come out at night, like the sphinx moth. And then we have different birds, and like I feel so lucky that I get to work from home, like when I am in the office, because when I need to take a break, I go to my backyard. And
Yeah.
what do? I look at the bees. I'm just like, looking at them. And then I have my binoculars, and sometimes I like get so scared that my neighbor's gonna knock on my door and like say, "Hey, what are you doing with your binoculars?" I'm like, "Rest assured, I am a birder." I get so frightened, but I'm like, I can't stop. I can't stop myself doing it because uh, it's stopping you from being wondrous, and like curious about something.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I kind of sometimes I feel like I should have a sign that says, "I'm a
I'm a
birder. I am not. I'm not trying to peek through your window." So pollinators, I just feel like the bees, especially, right? Like
Yeah.
when I was younger, I'll tell you a story. My mom always kept us active in sports, like me and my sisters. And one year, I must have been a junior or a senior in high school. I came home from swimming, so I was part of the swim team. And right before, we only had like an hour before we had to go to our next sport, which was karate. And one day I was so tired that I was like, you know what? I'm more tired than hungry.
Hmm.
I went to my room and I was like trying to take a nap, and I heard like a bee. I heard a buzz. Like I was like, zzz. And I'm like, oh, how funny, because we live in a two-story house. So my room was upstairs. And so I thought, oh, there's a bee outside my window. And no, it was actually inside my room. And then I was like so scared that I was seeing more and more. And then I went to the bathroom and I saw bees there. And then so I go downstairs and I'm like, Mom, there's like so many bees in my room. Like, what's happening? So my mom calls my dad and he's like, just step out of the house and wait until I get there. And there was this swarm of bees above my house near the AC. And my room has like what would you call it? Like the attic. And
Okay.
so they went through there, in through my attic, into my room.
Wow.
And I was like so frightened because at that time I was scared of bees. Like I was just,
Yeah.
because everyone's scared of bees.
Yeah. We're trained to be.
um, yeah. And so it was so crazy because after that, I am not kidding you. Bees would come to my ear all the time. Like they would just buzz in my ear and I'll be like, ah, like I
Yeah.
would never hurt them, but I was just always freaked out. It was always in my ear, like every time I was outside. And so then I got curious, right? Now not knowing that I was like my nature journaling, but
Yes.
I got curious and I ended up finding out that my name means honeybee in Greek.
Are
And
you
so,
serious?
yeah. And this was years after, like, when I did some reflection about my life, when you have those moments of
Yes.
reflection, I was like, "Oh," I was like, "That makes sense." And then I don't know, like, I've always also been fascinated with, how they live their lives, like, after really acknowledging the world that we see as landscapes in the gardens, but, like, what's underneath all that surface?
Mm,
Because it's not just we see it, but then something else may trickle in through the garden, and you're like, "What's that?" And so I've always been curious about observing them and learning more about them, and then when I learned more about them, about the bees in particular, it was like after that, it was bats, and then it was birds, because when I was younger, actually, before I was really involved like, curious about bees, it was butterflies. I had an older cousin well, I have an older cousin, she's such a blessing in my life, but she was always fond of butterflies, and, I've always, like, loved butterflies because she was an inspiration for me,
mhm.
and so it's so funny how, like, different periods of our lives, there could be something that you are like very deeply curious and passionate about. And then it becomes like this whole, at the end, it's like not the end of the story, but it's like the story of your life of how like everything kind of shapes your life
Yes,
and your passions. So
absolutely.
it's wonderful to learn how they live their life. They're all different, in a way, but they're all connected.
Yeah. And what would you recommend for just everyday gardeners as ways to encourage pollinators to visit the garden?
Yeah, so one of the things that we love to incorporate into our garden designs is incorporating the use of color. So we like to incorporate some non-native species that are drought tolerant, but then also native species that we can utilize those type of plants for nectar for all kinds of pollinators. Like for example, the brittle bush is one of my favorites. It has this really beautiful yellow flowers that is usually green all year long from the actual leaf structure and the leaf color, and it has like this pale green. And so when we combine certain colors together, like I love to use combos of threes or fives, like odd numbers, with incorporating some other plants that have like the color green or purple. And so by utilizing these different colors in combination of odd numbers, we are attracting pollinators that can see certain colors. For example, like bees, they see yellow, green, and blue. And also they see UV color, which is it's a spectrum of colors that we don't see. And I recently had this conversation with one of my favorite birders, and we were talking about pollinators and like habitats. And I was telling him about the use of color and everything. And he's like, I asked him, I was like, so how do birds see? And he's like, they see very similar, just depending on the species. So I was like, oh my God, I'm like in the right track because I we attract the different birds and bees and then also other pollinators. Like, for example, when we use desert milkweed, it's not just for the monarchs, but also ladybugs. Ladybugs love to lay their eggs in milkweed because when the egg hatches, the ladybugs will eat the aphids, which the aphids are attracted to the milkweeds. So it's just like this beautiful ecosystem and a habitat that will create a soothing color for us, but then also it's attracting the pollinators for food and shelter, and then also using a water source. Like I always love to incorporate like bird baths so that birds and bees can drink, and butterflies, and also like boulders so that they can be sunbathed, and it just creates this different texture and elements within the garden. And so it's I don't know, it's just like a soothing, healing environment for us, but then also it's just like that haven for pollinators.
I love that. So it sounds like diversity in color, texture, flower shape, flower type, habitat. Diversity will bring a diversity of pollinators, it sounds like.
Yes, exactly. Like even like the shape of flowers, like trumpet flowers. I mean, hummingbirds love trumpet flowers. And it's so funny because now when I think of hummingbirds, I think of you because I
Yes.
remember I remember in one of your podcasts with someone, I can't remember who, but your wish is to see a hummingbird. And I'm like,
Yes.
oh my God, it's like I see them every day. So every time I see one, I think of you.
One day I'm going to see it and it's going to be
Oh my
amazing.
god. I know, you should come to Vegas and, like, check them out.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
So you mentioned it before, but I'd love to talk more about it. There's a special place, Henderson Bird Viewing Preserve, and you undertook a special project there during your studies, and I'd love for you to talk about your project and what this particular place means to you.
Yeah, so when I was in college, I was interning for the city of Henderson, for the Parks and Recreation, and my mentor was showing me around, like, different places that we were gonna be working with in part of her department. And she took me to the city of Henderson Bird Preserve, and I was just like amazed of like how beautiful the place was back then. This was like back in 2013 probably. And because it's a water reclamation facility, and I started to learn about the history of it, of like how it was attracting birds that migrate, and all these different ponds, there's like 9 ponds. It was attracting all of this like beautiful bird species, and so the red rock audubon, like the birders back in the 60s, they reached out and were like, this is a place that we need to preserve.
Mm.
And so when I was researching all of that, I just started to take the idea of like, this is going to be my capstone project. I'm like, I want to be a birder too. And I
Yeah.
had no idea that birders existed. I was like, wow, where are my birders at? Like, I want to learn more about this place. And so it just, at that time, my concept was to bring pollinators, to bring more shade and shelter for visitors, and also like an educational platform for people, like outdoor classrooms, and just bringing this whole ecosystem. Like that's when I started getting into like learning about ecological design, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this. This is so cool. Because I love to get my hands dirty too, and
Yeah.
so it to do like to look into pollinators and to look into like the soils and everything. It's like you have to get your hands dirty. And it's like it's really cool that this place it is actually one of the largest bodies of water in southern Nevada. Like that's one
Wow.
of them. And so back in the 60s, like the National Audubon Society recognized it as part of their Christmas bird count. And so I was just like so fascinated that it was like this whole like documentation of like people that really appreciated birds and wanted to protect them, that the city came together as a community and created this beautiful place that what it is now. And then I hadn't been there in so long that I was with one of my newest friends. She's a birder too, and I really held in a lot of my emotions, but like
Mm.
afterwards I had a breakdown, like a healthy breakdown, because
Yeah.
I was just like, "Oh my god, I can't believe everything that I envisioned was happening and I had no clue." It like
Yes.
was like manifesting itself. Like I remember propagating cottonwood trees around the pond one year when I was still in college, and seeing them how big they are now, I was like, "Oh my god." I was like, and like seeing the milkweeds, like I didn't plant those, but I left a list of different plants that they could plant just to kind of get that meadow going for the
Hmm.
birds and stuff. And to see them like grow, and then now I see caterpillars, I was just like,
Yes.
"Oh my
Oh,
god, this
wow.
is nature is my studio." It's so amazing that how it manifested itself, like what I was envisioning by heart. Like I was like the intention of me seeing the future of it, it
Yes.
was happening all throughout these years since I had been there, and it's a wonderful feeling, and I'm just so grateful that as a community, people were creating this. They were creating it,
Yeah.
and so it's very interesting because it's a lot of people don't know about it.
Yeah. It sounds like it's really part of your heart now, that place is.
Yeah, because of that place, it it was so much more appreciation for nature, and
Mm.
love was just like it was an experience of my life that I will never forget. And everything that led to that. And then it also reminded me when I went back how important it was for me to separate my life from my business because I'm
Mm.
so passionate about what I
Mhm.
do. I get so like lost in that world that I don't create it for myself sometimes. Like I forget about me.
Yes.
And so going back to that place, I was like, oh my God, I was like, I love to bird and I stopped doing it for so long. And, it's like I felt like the universe was saying, hey, remember me. And it's like,
Mhm.
yes, I do. And I
Mhm.
love you and I will not leave you again.
Oh, that's so good. And so one thing that you do for you is nature journaling, and I'd love to talk about nature journaling specifically and
Mhm.
how it all started and what it means to you, what it brings to your life.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, I came across one of John Muir Law's like YouTube videos, and I was just so fascinated by his teachings of like being in nature and documenting. And I've always been a fan of writing. I love to
Mhm.
journal. Like I love to write and of course sketch and stuff, but integrating it while you're experiencing nature, I was like blown away. I was just like, "Oh my God, I need that in my life." And so we, it, you know, I'm so grateful that during the pandemic, we were an essential business to continue
Mm.
doing our business. So I never had a break, like, or I don't, that's maybe not the right word, but I never had the lockdown experience. I was still outdoors. And so like that breadcrumb,
Yes.
was so important because I started to nature journal and I realized how all of the questions that I have for myself, it's being documented in a different way through sketching. Like it encouraged me to sketch more and to dig deeper into research. And I found out that it's helping me be a better designer for pollinators and for people because I'm experiencing certain feelings, but I'm also learning so much about, for example, the monarch butterfly or the season changing in one of the wildlife refuge that I was visiting. And um, I don't know, it takes it to a different level in a very fun and
Mhm.
enjoyable. Like sometimes when I can't sleep or I really have that muse feeling of like
Yes.
journaling, I always go back to the last journal entry that I did because I may do it in the field, like sketch, but I do my research in my office or in my room and I will watercolor. But when I'm on site, I tend to just draw and then write down all kinds of questions or reflections. And later on, that's when I dig deep into my research. And so what I started to do now is if I have my book and it's like this, right? Like the two sheets, and one side is like the field where I'm sketching, and then over here is where I'm documenting all of my research so that
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
when I open it, it's like together,
Yeah.
if possible. Yeah.
And you wrote a few things about creativity and perfectionism, and I'd love for you to talk about your relationship with those two things and how they play off each other and how you sort of encourage yourself through that.
Yes, so you were actually one of the first people that reminded me to like not try to make things so perfect. like when I took your the creative morning sessions with the nature journaling. So see, that was the other breadcrumb. So I was telling my creative director one morning, I'm like, I just saw like John Muir Law's videos and I'm gonna nature journal. And she's known me for years. And she's always been supporting me into creating this business. And she's like, just keep, back then it was just like, keep writing about it,
Hmm.
draw and sketch. Not knowing that I was really like nature journaling, but
Yes.
I was telling her, I'm like, guess what? There is a nature journal on in the world. And then she's like, really? That is so cool. And she's like, well, keep doing what you're doing, because you need to balance your life with nature for yourself. And then the next day, I will never forget. The next day from our meeting, she sends me a link to your class, and I
That's
was like,
amazing.
"Oh my god!" It was like so cool. So when I took your class, I remember how you said that you don't like to use pencil, that you like
Hmm.
to do like your pen because you don't want to like go back and like you just want to continue what you're drawing without having that perfectionism in mind. And since I've always tried to make things perfect, things never get done because
Yes.
and so I don't want to fall back. So nature journaling has helped me to not. Sometimes I'll use pencil, but like very rare. I think it's like what I like about the pencil is like how it sounds. It's like so
Yes,
weird.
I do like that too. Yeah, you're right.
And how it smells. Like I'm just so weird, but but so I tend to use the pen more because I don't I nature journaling has really helped me to ease my anxieties
Mm,
because I want things to be perfect. And sometimes I lack, how would I describe it? Like, if there's something that I want to create, I stop myself from creating it or to continue creating it because I'm like, oh, it's not perfect enough.
yeah.
It's not good enough. And so I need to build that confidence of like, it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. Nothing is perfect. So it reminds me not to be perfect, like,
Yeah.
or try to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
perfect because no one's perfect. Nothing is perfect.
And what is it for? I mean, so good enough for what? It's not going to be in a
Exactly.
gallery. And you've talked about nature journaling, connecting you with pollinators, connecting you with information, connecting you with what's around you, learning, deepening your understanding and love of nature. So a perfect drawing isn't going to do that better than an imperfect drawing. I don't even like those
Mhm.
words, but you know what
Mhm.
I mean? Like you're deepening that connection, and that's the goal.
Mhm.
Whether it looks like, whether you get 10 points for who's going to give the
Yeah.
points? It doesn't make sense, does it? But we do this to
No.
ourselves in our minds.
Mhm. No, yeah. In some of the drawings that I've done in my sketches, like it's so funny. Like my first bird I drew was so flat. I was like, this is the worst bird in my life that I've ever. And then like a couple like in October during like when the fall season was coming, I like drew a barn swallow.
Hmm.
And because it's so funny like how why I drew a barn swallow. I was seeing a lot of swallowtail butterflies in my garden, like
Hmm.
every day. So I was like every day, like taking photos, and we're trying. They don't like you to get near them either, so
Okay.
it was kind of difficult. But I'm like, why are they called swallowtails? Like it, why is and so the name comes to be because of the tail of swallowtail
Mm.
birds, and I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, so I drew a barn swallow.
Beautiful.
And it's like less flat because I just kind of I it I kind of disconnected from the perfectionism of trying to
Yes.
make the perfect bird, and it's like
Yeah.
no, just have fun. And so I
Yeah.
just having fun, so it reminds me of fun too.
Yeah. And the imperfect drawings teach us something. You can't learn anything from a perfect drawing, can you? But you learn from what you can improve. You looked at your first drawing and thought that it looked flat, and so the next one you learn from the one you did previously.
Exactly. I know. It's so interesting when you look back at old entries and you're
Yeah.
like, ooh, and then also an old entry, like I was, because we had such a beautiful monsoon season this year.
Okay.
We had like the symphony of the cicadas.
Oh, wow.
It was so incredible. So, like, I ended up finding a lifeless cicada in my garden,
Yeah.
and I just started to draw it out. And now I'm like hoping that we have another monsoon season just like this year because we need it. So I'm looking forward to the spring too, like from because of a beautiful monsoon season, all of the beautiful plants that we'll see out in the desert, like
Mhm.
all the wildlife and the wildflowers that we're able to see. So I am like, oh my gosh, like I get like I'm just so
You
excited
get
about
excited.
yeah, for like the next season. I was like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like it's exciting to look back and they're like, "Oh, I can't wait to hear the cicadas again," or because they were, they emerge and their life is also so interesting. So I like go down this rabbit hole about cicadas too, and it's like
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh my gosh." I was like, it's not it's it's an endless project having a nature journal, and
Yes.
I love it. I love it so much.
It's an endless project. That's beautiful and so true. And I love that because we can get fascinated by anything. The life cycle of
Mhm.
a cicada, the life cycle of a monarch, whatever it is. And we can do that endlessly forever, and that is such a joy. We wouldn't want to suddenly know everything because we get all these amazing discoveries throughout life that we can dive into, and that's something really precious.
It is, and that's what helps us tune into nature and out of all the responsibilities of life that could be very stressful or very heavy, because it helps us to tune into ourselves and center ourselves to approach life in a different way. And so I think that's why I was like, I will never stop birding or never stop. Like I've always been observer of
Yeah.
birds and stuff, but not like with binocular. I hadn't done that in such a long time. It was just like so different. Like I would get lost in the world with landscapes within my clients that I never realized that I kind of stopped doing these other things, but I was still
Mm.
being nourished. But it was I don't know if I can explain it right, if you know what
Yeah,
I mean.
I do. So it's a little bit different when you're working rather than when you're tuning in with your own heart.
Yeah, and so nature journaling has really helped with that, and I love going back and it's like finding new discoveries.
Yeah. And now you're sharing that with others. You've just run your first nature journaling workshop with Audubon. Tell
I
me about that.
did. Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. I did it with my friend Marigan, and she's part of the Red Rock Audubon. That's how I met her this year. And it's so interesting. Like she she saw me from afar at a BioBlitz event at one of the
Mm-hmm.
community gardens. It's actually really close to my house. And during that BioBlitz, I mean, I took my nature journaling. Oh, and it's so funny because the day of the BioBlitz was the last day of the Wild Wonder Conference.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember what John Muir Law said? Or he said, "Go out into nature and find awe." And coincidentally, it was the day of the BioBlitz event.
Mm.
And so I took my nature journal. I'm like, maybe I'll find awe there. We'll see what let's see what happens. And I did. I was like, I went into this nostalgia of like when I was in school because we used to do community garden designs and how to connect community with food. And I just started sketching. And she saw me from afar and she's like, when I saw her before I left, she's like, "Were you nature journaling?" I was like, "I was." And she's like, "I love to nature journal too." So I was like,
That's
"Oh my God,
amazing.
I love." And she's like, she was born and raised here too, just like me. So I was just so like, I'm such a nerd, but I'm like, I was just like, "Let's have a nature journaling together." And she's like, "Yes, let's
Totally.
do it." And she created this event with the Red Rock Audubon Society, and it was a success. It was so amazing. I had so much fun, and I love her style too, and she's just an incredible person, and I'm really excited for our next one
Yeah.
because we love it and we share it with the community and it becomes even more abundant. Like the feeling is like, like because people want to connect to nature And it's so interesting, like the different people that were a part of the event. Like there were some young people, and there was some other generations too that just, oh my gosh, like they drew so well, and it was like so much fun. And then one of my friends came to the event, and she was able to tune out of the world, and she was nature journaling. It was just amazing to witness, but it was also amazing to nature journal with them because I've always done it by myself, you know.
Yes.
And we saw like some incredible birds, and that experience is unforgettable, you know. It's a memory that we can go back to, that it's like officially documented in your journal, you know?
Yes. Yes, that's a wonderful thing too about nature journaling is it captures a memory for you and it springs to life as soon as you look at that page again, doesn't it?
Yes, it really does. And to do it alongside someone else that's also passionate about it, it was amazing. So
I can feel the joy that you have when you talk about this, and the joy is spreading. It's contagious joy, which is so amazing.
yay, I know. You for you too. I love your style. I learned so much even from the Wild Wonder conference in your class too. I was like, ooh, line work. I was like, yes, I need to capture all these different, you know, line weights. It's incredible the amount of materials available for us, you know?
Yes. Sometimes you have to go back to basics, don't you, just to remember to keep it simple and not get too fussy. I don't know.
Yeah, which is also a play of like perfectionism because
Yes.
I keep my kit very limited because if I turn into that perfectionist mode,
Hmm.
I over travel with stuff, and I'm like, no, simple, simple, simple.
In your workshop, did you have some people who came there with art anxieties, or was everyone feeling confident about that?
I feel like everyone was pretty confident. Like I didn't get that vibe of anxiety, or
Yeah.
you know, because I also too, like I think like what we said was like you don't have to be an or be considered an artist or like
Hmm.
someone that draws all the time. No, like just tune into nature. We're gonna go walk around the ponds, and we're gonna see what we explore. And we were supposed to come back into the classroom, but because we had so much fun doing it outside
Yeah.
already, we just stayed outside, and it was fun. And everyone was very like so connected to the nature with their journal.
Hmm.
It was a beautiful experience to see that. So it's like people really do need to tune out
Yeah.
and like just connect with your page and nature.
Absolutely. It's been amazing to connect with you today. I love your story. I love speaking with you and hearing all about it. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Bethan. It was such a pleasure talking to you, and I can't wait to talk to you soon.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Melissa. Her work creating wildlife habitats and natural havens for people and animals is really important. Humans have eliminated so much habitat and modified so much of what remains that these garden spaces that invite and nurture native plants and animals are so necessary for the health of the natural world and for human health too. Please visit the show notes for this episode to find links to Melissa's website and Instagram page so that you can find out more about these sacred gardens. So that's it for the podcast for this year. I hope you're planning something nice for the end of the year. I'm heading now to the beach with my family for a couple of weeks, and we'll be back with you for a new year and new podcast episodes in the first week of January. Take good care of yourself. See you next year.